Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dong Kang, the host of the online session 8, and the agenda of our session is Global Campaign, the Financing for SDGs and Climate Action by Disarmament, which is 2% for the US initiative. And I'm pleased to hosting this session. And before we start, I'd like to introduce Professor Anselmo Lee, who is the organizer and chair of APSD, and he will give some welcome remarks. And after then, we will give 3 presentations about this agenda, and then we will invite 2 more panels, and we will have open discussion about this entire agenda. And if you have any questions or you want to share your inspiration or feedback, then please use this link, this Padlet link. Then you can add some questions or share your ideas and insights to every participant. So please give a pause to Professor Anselmo Lee.
Thank you very much, Kang Dong-yeol. On behalf of organizing committee of the Pyeongchang Odaesan Peace Global Forum, I would like to welcome you and also congratulate this very important session, especially Mr. Kang Dong-yeol, who organized this session. As we see in the program, we have 11 online sessions for this week, starting 2 days ago, and half of them are about youth or led by youth, which means we want to really give the emphasis on the role of youth for climate and peace and SDG. As you know, the last 4 years, we have been participating Pyeongchang Peace Forum, but unfortunately this year, the local government, the host of the Pyeongchang Peace Forum, are not able to finance this Pyeongchang Peace Forum. That's why some participants, international and domestic, decide to continue the reflection and discussion on some of the key issues which we believe important, so that we can continue to remember and also spread the Pyeongchang peace spirit, which we believe is very important for sustaining peace, climate, and SDG. So I look forward to a fruitful discussion. I will stay with you to learn more from you so that I can put your input into the overall proceeding so that everybody understand, and then we can develop joint action together. Thank you and congratulations once again. Over to you, Mr. Kang.
Yep. Thank you very much again, Professor Anselmo Lee. So from now on, let us start this session 8, 2% for the US initiative. And as the first speaker of this session, I'd like to present about the entire concept of the 2% for the US initiative. And this initiative heading to financing for SDGs and climate action by Disarmament. So let's begin. So I don't want to make you awkward, but we are living in doomsdays. Yeah, we are really doomed. As it's not my insight. This insight came from our Secretary General, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres. He said the humanity faces the collective suicide over climate crisis. So he said we are standing on the edge between the collective suicide or collective action. And I also want to introduce 2 clocks, which is climate clock and doomsday clock. And climate clock showed us how many hours and days and months and years to 1.5 degrees Celsius rising. So climate clock warns us we only remain 6 years and 5 months. And doomsday clock, they also warns us we only got 100 seconds to midnight. Not 200, not 300, just 100 to the midnight. And the midnight means the doom. But I don't want to threaten you, and I don't want to make the atmosphere quite heavy. So I would like to share my school lives when I was in high school. So I would like to share my memories in high schools, and it makes us more softer, I guess. So when I was high school, I read a book which is name was Empire of Shame, and the author of Empire of Shame, uh, who is the Zhang Ziegler, the famous one of the famous sociologist. And in that book, the author, the Zhang Ziegler, Professor Zhang Ziegler, showed us a graph, and that graph was posted in front of the United Nations headquarters. Let me show you what was that chart. So this chart is that thing, what I saw in the book, and I bring here. And the title of the chart is Overspending on Weapons versus People. And as you can see, the top portion of this chart showed us the annual world military expenditures, and it's 800 billion USD. And the opposite side is about people and developments. So as you can see, at that period, it is 2005, and the global society, they spend only 50 billion USD for provide clean and safe energy, and they spend 30 billion to retire developing countries debt, and they use 21 billion USD for provide healthcare and AIDS control and etc. 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 But the high school Kang Dong-yeol thought it's a bit weird because the author of this book, Professor Zhang Ziegler, he said he described about this chart. The shape is reversed triangle or reversed pyramid type, but the figures, I mean the numbers, doesn't seem like the triangle. So I put that figures into the Excel chart, and this is the result. So as we can see, it is obviously not a pyramid type or triangle type. It's like drawing pin, right? We spend a lot of money to killing each other, and we spend a few budget for saving each others. And I was like, it's a bit weird and it's wrong. So back to my high school story. So I just curious about, so how much do we spend money to saving each others? So I would like to figure out what's going on the global society. So as or we are the country who highly supported by United Nations during Korean War and after Korean War. So we are the biggest recipient of official development assistance, ODA. So I focus on the ODA currency. So I entered the OECD DAC, Development Assistance Committee's webpage, and they showed us the most valuable targets, which is the 0.7% ODA per GNI target. It means the 30 countries who are the member of OECD DAC, they agreed to donate 0.7% of their GNI for official development assistance. So in other words, they spend this amount of money to saving each others. So I checked the currency. So this chart from the OECD's webpage and their report on the April of 2022. And according to OECD, the entire member countries of OECD DAC spent 178.9 billion USD on 2021, and their original goal, their original target was 0.7%, but they achieved only 1.39% ODA per GNI. So it means 0.31% is still remained. So we should achieve this amount, right? And back to the military spending, military expenditure. According to Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, they said they announced that the world military expenditure passed 2 trillion for the first time. Specifically, is 2.1 trillion USD. So we spend quite amount of our budget to kill each other. So I would like to drag the ODA per GNI on this page. So 2.1 trillion means 2,100 billion USD, right? And it is quite amount rather than the ODA spending, right? So I think if the entire humanity and entire member countries of United Nations, they spend just 1%, just 1% to saving each others, then what is going to be happen to our present or our future? So I just assume. So if they put just 1% of their military expenditure every year to OECD DAC, then what is going to be happen? And if they put this amount of money on Green Climate Fund every year, and what is going to be happen? So let me show you my naive calculation. So this is my my rough draw, my blueprints. So as I introduced you before, the global society, especially the 30 donor countries, they still remain 142 billion US dollars. But if we put just 1% of our military expenditures to OECD DAC ODA expenditures, then year one it goes to just 122, year two, year 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and as we all know, the SDGs expired on 2030, right? But year 2030, the global society, the OECD DAC member country, they finally achieve, it is not just achieve, it is overachieve about their 0.7% ODA per GNI targets. So we can save each other's. And what if we put that 1% of world military expenditure to Green Climate Fund? So 2022, the Green Climate Fund budget is just 9.9 billion USD. But if we put just 1% of world military expenditure in Green Climate Fund, it goes 29.9, 49.9, 69.9, and etc. It's almost 10 times bigger. So maybe, hopefully, we can delay the 1.5 Celsius limitation. So that is my blueprints for the 2% for the Earth initiatives. So my organization, the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, we highly interested in achieving SDGs because we involved in the process to establishing SDGs. So we already give similar trial before. So in the year 2016 to 2018, we already tried the global movement, which is named as Move Humanity. And Move Humanity is a global initiative that aims to close the SDG finance gap in the lowest income countries by mobilizing greater private funding for basic health and education, critical infrastructure, and etc., etc. In other words, achieving SDGs. And the global magazine Forbes, they report that there are now, like, quote, 2,208 billionaires in the world, and these individuals possess a collective net worth of 9.1 trillion. In other words, 9,100 billion USD. So the SDS and Global, they made this Move Humanity campaign around the world, and they tried to persuade these 2,208 billionaires to donate just 1% of their wealth to the SDGs. That would equal to almost 100 billion, which can achieve the 0.7% ODA per GNI gap. But it was quite naive. I know I'm also naive, but there is no reason why this individual give their own wealth to the global society. Anyway, so our original target was bring 1 billion humans out of poverty and save 6 million children from preventable disease, and etc., etc., etc. And the result was, actually, Warren Buffett joined in the Move Humanity initiative, but the result was not successful. But I still have hope, and I still have my new blueprint to achieving SDGs and cover the ODA targets, and etc., etc., and includes climate action. Because SDS in Korea and SDS in Youth Korea, we made some milestones to achieving this kind of new type of initiatives. So last year, we assembled the chairman of National Sustainable Development Committee, and we also invited chairman of Korean Association for Sustainable Development, and we also invited the chairman of Local Sustainability Alliance of Korea, and we also invited Secretary General of Korean Local Governments Alliance for Sustainable Development, and chairman of Korea Business Council for Sustainable Development, and chairman of Korea Sustainable Campus Association. And what we did, we made a resolution against our National Assembly to create the Frame Act law for SDGs. And in Korean legal system, the Frame Act law is the highest level of our law. So last January 4th, our National Assembly finally adopted the Frame Act law for SDGs, and last July 5th, since last July 5th, our government, not only the central government, but also our metropolitan government and local governments, they start to implementing SDGs in their local level and federational level and central levels. So this is the historical picture in the National Assembly, and as you can see, 94.53% of our National Assembly member agreed to establishing the framework law for sustainable development. And also, we invited the youth leaders from along the Korean Peninsula. So we invited more than 100 youth activists. They're all the leaders of their own organizations, and by using the Metaverse platform, they showed the peer pressure to the National Assembly members. So Korean civil society and Korean youth society, they have a small milestone to achieving SDGs in their domestic level, but also the global scales. So I'm quite confident because we also published VYR, voluntary youth reviews, forever. As you know, HLPF, they recommend to the member countries of United Nations to publish VNR, voluntary national reviews, for every 4 years, right? But there, and some of local authorities, they try to publish VLR, voluntary local reviews. So 3 of our Korean local government, they published VLR, but there was no VYR ever. But Korean youth activists, they come together and they research together, and they finally published VYR to the global society. So I think these kind of our small milestones can shows us some optimistic future. So I think the youth and the civilians can move the policymakers and decision makers in National Assembly or each branch or minister of our government. So why not? Why not? We can persuade our ministers of minister of defense or minister of environment, minister of foreign affairs, maybe prime minister. We have our powers. So my blueprint is we can make some solidarity activity by using the opportunities in our regional scale. For example, UNESCO, they hosting the regional SDG monitoring conference on every March in Asian Pacific region, and on every November they also hosting their sub-regional monitoring conference in Northeast Asia, and other UN entities, they also hosting their regional or sub-regional SDG monitoring system. So we can join in those kind of conferences or forums or symposiums, and we can put this disarmament agenda or bring mobilizing the budget for SDGs and climate action agenda into the United Nations and or each respective countries. So I think we can change the world if we move together. So because the United Nations, I mean, especially HLPF and the Rio Plus 10 and 20, they already focus on the uses, the capacity and capability, because they nominated us as a member of major groups and other stakeholders, in other words, MGOs. So our voice is justified by United Nations, right? Why not? Why not we can why not we can change the world? So if you interest in the our initiative 2% for the Earth, and if you wanna be the focal point or colleagues for this initiative, please do not hesitate to reaching out to me. And this is end of my speech, and thank you very much. Yeah. So from now on, let me introduce our second speaker, Mr. Afik Ismajiam, who is the secretary focal point of SDS in Asia, and he is the most intelligent person in Malaysia. So let's give some applause to Mr. Afik.
Thank you, Dong. Thank you so much. I should say, annyeonghaseyo, everybody. Yes, my name is Afik Ismaizam. I am with the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. I'm a secretary of Focal Point. And actually, Dong did not mention earlier in his presentation, I actually work really closely with Dong because that is the nature of my work. I work closely with network managers who are in charge of the national network. So apart from SDS in Korea, I message SDS in Thailand, Philippines, Japan, Pakistan, Philippines, Thailand, Kazakhstan, and Afghanistan as well. So I have a few networks under me, and my other colleagues are taking the other Asia networks. And it has been a privilege to be working with Dong all this time. Clearly, he is actually the most intelligent person, not me. And some of the looking at his presentations earlier, there is a lot of overlap of what I'm about to talk to you about and share some of my thoughts on nuclear denuclearization and also nuclear disarmament. So Dong, I sent you my PowerPoint slides.
Can you share by yourself? Or,
yes, I can.
Yeah.
Okay, in that case, just give me a second. Okay, you can't see anything, right?
Yeah, not yet.
Okay. No worries.
Your time.
How about now?
Yeah. Can you make it presentation mode?
Yeah. Is this better? You can see it now?
Not really.
Not really. Is in presentation mode now.
Not yet. Can you press F5 button?
Wait, here you go. Here's the presentation mode. I just clicked it. No?
No. Maybe I can share. Hold on.
Yes. See? Dong is the most intelligent person.
No. It's our cooperation.
It should be straightforward, right? Sharing screen. I don't know why on Zoom. But on Google, I do it all the time.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dong. So everybody, I would like to start my presentation. It's on the Invisible SDG 16, disarmament and denuclearization. And I will be speaking on behalf of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. And towards the end, propose some areas of recommendation where we can cooperate greater among at the global level or even at the national level. Okay. Next slide, please, Dong. Okay, so as you know, the 16 is one of the 17 goals, but it is essential that we get the SDG 16 right. What I'm trying to say is that success of SDG 16 will ensure the success of all the other goals, because goal 16 ensures continuity and stability. How can you have climate action? How can you have life on land or life below water if your institutions are not strong? Because you need institutions to promote these. And this is what SDG 16 is all about. So that's why I put there SDG 16 is the cornerstone of the overall agenda. SDG 16 does well, all the other goals do well. SDG 16 is built upon the premise that democracy, peace, and sustainable development are inseparable. So it's not two separate things. Peace and sustainable development go hand in hand together. However, there has been some challenge in getting the right data for SDG 16. So there's a bit of a data collection problem for both official and non-official sources. And as the last bullet point shows, that it is predicted that it's very likely that many key indicators for SDG 16 will not be reached by 2030. And I think we all know why, because we have a major war happening between Russia and Ukraine. We just came out of COVID, but possibly maybe re-entering another lockdown with a new strain of COVID. I hope not. And when you have these two happening at the same time, it is a major roadblock in achieving SDG 16. Not just SDG 16, but all of them. Okay, but you can see that the war in Ukraine has caused the attention of world leaders to be diverted to focus on the war rather than on sustainable development. So all the funding, all the money is going to humanitarian aid and help to rebuild Ukraine rather than focusing on sustainable development. So it is a major distraction. However, with individuals like Mr. Lee and Dong here and all the individuals here, we can make a difference. And based on the presentation that Dong gave, we still have to act as a pressure group to make sure that the wealthy nations, the wealthy individuals take these SDGs seriously by carving out a percentage of their net worth. And as Dong suggested, just carve out 1% is sufficient, right? But it has to be globally, not just one billionaire, right? It should be all of them, right? But this is just a preview of what's to come later in the presentation. So if I can have the next slide now. So this image was taken from the 2022 Sustainable Development Report. So I purposely focused on SDG 16, and as you can see, based on the ratings there, only two indicators are in green. And you can only see two arrows going up, one for population who feels safe walking alone at night, and property rights. So from immediately by looking at this chart, you know that SDG 16, we are not progressing. Simple as. And more needs to be done. Because as you can see at the bottom of the slide there, together with goal 17, peace, diplomacy, and international cooperation are fundamental conditions for the world to progress on SDGs towards 2030 and beyond. And the reason why I put goal 17 is that we can't do it alone. We need international partnerships. And as I mentioned before, if you look at bullet point number 2, the war in Ukraine, COVID-19, and many other military conflicts around the world, it's making the progress slow, and it's exacerbated by poverty, food insecurity, and access to affordable energy. So the last bullet point just shows that global cooperation and commitment to the bedrock SDG principles of social inclusion, clean energy, responsible consumption, and universal access to public services are needed more than ever. So this is where Dong's calculation comes in. Where I say needed more than ever, we need that 1% or 1 to 2% of the net worth to be channeled here, because we only have a few years left until 2030. And as Dong rightly pointed out, we are doomed. And that is your first slide, right? So for us to not be doomed, we need more holistic and international cooperation. So this is what this SDG 16 screenshot is trying to show. Okay, next slide, please. And here is essentially kind of the challenges of SDG 16. So you have 4: access to justice, reduction to violence, corruption, and transparency. So number 1, access to justice. As you know, many countries are going through a tough time when it comes to implementing justice, particularly for the marginalized communities and women. However, there have been efforts to increase justice through initiatives like legal aid programs and the development of alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. So that, the second bullet point, that's not new, but it has to be progressing. It has to continue. Number 2, reduction to violence. So there have been many efforts to reduce violence. We all know this. We have UN peacekeeping mission. We have disarmament program, which I will show later on a different slide. And then the strengthening of the criminal justice system. However, conflict and violence is still a major problem, right? So you see the issues in Myanmar, in Syria, in Palestine, in the Xinjiang province, and then of course the war in Russia, in Ukraine, the Ukraine-Russia war, is still there, right? So that's the challenge to SDG 16. Number 3 is corruption. So we all know the story behind corruption, right? Every country is facing a corruption problem, and therefore it undermines the rule of law, and it erodes the trust in institutions. So we need to strengthen these institutions through anti-corruption laws, and also the establishment of the anti-corruption agencies. In Malaysia, here we do have them, and thankfully they are progressing well, but not fast enough. And because we are in ASEAN, we are an ASEAN country, we cannot progress by ourselves. We also have to help strengthen institutions around ASEAN as well, not just in Malaysia. Number 4 is on transparency. So the use of technology has increased transparency in some areas, such as public procurement, but there is still the need for information accessibility, and that is accurate, that is clear. Some countries may restrict certain information or not made public, and that is a challenge for SDG 16. So in my opinion, I'm narrowing down 4 challenges on SDG 16. So just to summarize: access to justice, reduction to violence, corruption, and transparency. Next slide, please, Doug. So if you're a history student or a political science student, you would probably be familiar with some of these terms. So between 1968 to 2010, there have been 6 international treaties signed between various countries to ban nuclear testing, to limit nuclear disarmament, to denuclearize the whole world, in fact. And this is a good thing. We've seen progress between each treaty, And the most recent one would be in 2021. If you look to your right, would be the UN Treaty on the Prohibitions of Nuclear Weapons. And more recently would be the Joint Comprehensive Action Plan of Action, which is called the Iran deal. If you did not know, back when President Obama was president of the United States, he had a foreign policy objective to get Iran to reduce their nuclear stockpile in exchange for millions of dollars of sanction relief. They reached an agreement. It was a milestone achievement. When Mr. Trump came into the office, he undid all that progress, much to the dismay of the European Union, particularly UK, France, and Germany, and also the Iranian government. But the Iranian government still wished maintain the Iran deal, even though the US was not part of it then. Now, with President Biden in charge of the US administration, negotiations are ongoing on whether to continue what was left by former President Obama, or perhaps start a new deal with new negotiations, with new modifications to the old deal, because it's a different president, and there's also a new administration in Iran. So this is a little bit of recent international affairs news that I think you all should know when it comes to nuclear disarmament and denuclearization. Where we come in, individuals like me and Dong, in charge of SDSN Korea and SDSN at large, we can come in to promote peace. We give education and research, monitor and control, public relations and advocacy. So we are on the other side of the spectrum, looking at these treaties and looking at the governments who adhere to these treaties, whether are the deal, the terms of the deal are being respected, right? So we act as a pressure group or a advisory force to these governments when it comes to nuclear disarmament and denuclearization. So that's why I say SDSN is actually in a unique position to help foster or help to push this denuclearization and disarmament agenda until 2030 and beyond. And I'll explain how that can be done in the next slide, if you could. So SDSN in essence, we mobilize scientific research and knowledge that is produced by universities and research institutes and help them advance the SDGs. Now the SDG 16 is part of the SDGs, and SDG 16 is affected by the disarmament and denuclearization. SDSN networks play a pivotal role in this regard. So we can do it in three ways. Firstly is research, secondly is education, thirdly is outreach. So under research, which is what we do mainly at SDSN, we showcase universities as centers of expertise and cutting edge research. So we help promote or help to mobilize universities to conduct research on non-proliferation technologies, verification and monitoring methods, and the impacts of nuclear weapons. We can also help inform policy making and contribute to international efforts to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons. When I say policy making, I mean we engage closely with the government of the day and help push the denuclearization and the disarmament agenda, which is of course in line with the SDG 16. Secondly is education. So we help promote and mobilize these universities who offer degree programs in a wide range of disciplines related to non-proliferation, such as physics, international relations, and of course law or international law. These programs can train the next generation, which is us, and then our children, about non-proliferation and provide them with the skills and knowledge they need to know to make a positive impact. And I say it's not just enough to make an impact, it has to be a positive one. Thirdly is outreach. So this is where I think an area of expertise for Dong, because he's such a good advocate for things that he's passionate about. So we help universities to engage with their local communities, the wider public audience, and other international organizations to raise awareness of the importance of nuclear non-proliferation. We also help. We can also help to build bridges between different cultures and nations to promote mutual understanding and reduce the risk of conflict. So if you look to your left, you see national networks, the circle. So you can think of that circle as SDSN Korea. And then the other circle on the left would be where I'm coming from, the network secretariat. So which means I, from the secretariat, would work with Dong, who is at the national network, to cover all these 3 points: research, education, and outreach. And it doesn't have to be on SDG 16. It could be on climate action. It could be on poverty. It could be life on land. It could be on sustainable cities or even the youth. But this is where I feel SDSN can provide value in terms of promoting the disarmament and the denuclearization agenda. And I would welcome everybody here to find out more information about not just SDSN Korea, but also SDSN Global, because we have many other interesting themes and research outputs coming out of SDSN. So for more information, if you can go to the next slide, you may contact me at afiq.ismaizam@unsdsn.org, and or perhaps reach out to Dong, and then perhaps we can have a separate conversation, particularly on SDG 16. And I forgot to mention that SDG 16 is one of my favorite SDGs. So back to you, Dong. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you for your inspiring presentation. Let's give some applause to Mr. Akfik Ismajaim. And next, I would like to introduce the third speaker, Kwon Yu-jung, who is the who is the alumni of SDSN Youth Korea, and she's the youth delegate for UNFCCC COP26. And she was also the former member of Green Environment Youth Korea, and she was also former member of Korea University Green activities. So, are you ready, Yu-jung? Yes. Please share your screen and let's give some applause to Miss Kwon Yu-jung.
Thank you. Let me just share my screen. Is it working?
Can you make it presentation mode?
Hold on. Let me just go to slideshow. Okay. Is it good?
Yeah, perfect.
Awesome. Thank you for the floor. Let me just hold on. Okay, so before I start, I kind of want to just briefly talk about the topic that I was asked to present to you guys today. To be honest, SDG 16 is a very hard topic to digest, especially as a youth. I feel like peace, justice, and strong institutions, it doesn't really relate to me on an everyday basis. And so, well, in comparing it to the other SDGs, such as energy and food, I feel like that's more relevant. But the more I was looking into it, I realized that it's actually it's like a connecting dot. Everything's related to everything. Everything impacts each other, and that will be the main focus on my presentation today. And so the key word that I'll be focusing on is how climate change is impacting our security level. It can be from the international all the way down to the local level. Okay. Now, I want to open my presentation today with a quite uncomfortable and I guess somewhat awkward question. Now, why is climate change a problem? I believe our audience here today have a shared understanding that climate change represents one of the most urgent global challenges of today. Now, Dong-Yeol will actually cover this as well, but I'm going to just highlight it again in my part. IPCC, their report in 2021, quoting their words on climate change, climate change is nothing less than a code for humanity. Now, it has been clearly highlighted, recognized, and agreed upon by climate scientists and major world leaders that human-induced climate change is an existential threat. Now, simply put, our Earth is facing an unprecedented change of global temperature level. This will forever alter our relationship with the planet we live on and depend on. Facts. But to be brutally honest, although I do feel the impact of climate change, and most of us all do, especially with horrible air pollution in my community. I come from Seoul, South Korea. The photo that you see in the left corner is actually from an article that was titled South Korea Joins Ranks of World Most Polluted Countries. In the down below, there's longer moon-sun seasons. This happened actually last August. Parts of Seoul recorded the heaviest rain since 1920. In the far right corner, we see that warmer winters. I felt this personally a lot during the winter time here. And I've been seeing a lot of the news where ski resorts are melting. According to the World Meteorological Organization, it estimates that we could see another hottest year on record within the next 5 years, which beats the previous record that was set in 2016. Now, in the far right corner this was taken in 2018, where Korea underwent a record heat wave with temperatures that were unseen in more than 100 years. Now, this led to the highest number of deaths since Korea began officially counting the casualties due to heat in 2011. Now, the majority of us don't live every day awakened by the fear of the impacts we are reminded of by climate change. This can be due to simply psychological distance, due to a set of uncertain events that might occur far in the future, impacting distant places and people, or even this can be simply due to climate change denial. Now, for myself, I am just a normal university student, but I have been a climate change advocate for some time. Now, as this photo shows in the left, the alarming truth that climate change is an existential threat, it's scary and frightening to digest. And it's also very mentally harming to live by this truth on an everyday basis. But climate change and furthermore biodiversity collapse is not a standalone issue, which I want to highlight in today's presentation. We will be experiencing the impact of everything else we're concerned about in our daily lives, from food prices, energy prices, national security due to frequent natural disasters, water supply issues, housing, jobs, migration, human health, and the list goes on. And so I want to coin the term threat multiplier. This might be a term that you guys may have heard of or is recently new to this terminology, but this is a terminology where climate change has been referred to as. Now, referencing a quote that well coins the terminology is by the first chief scientist and research director in WMO. He said that climate change has a multitude of security impacts, rolling back the gains in nutrition and access to food, heightening the risk of wildfires and exacerbating air quality challenges, increasing the potential for water conflict, leading to more internal displacement and migration. It is increasingly regarded as a national security threat. Now, climate change may not always be a direct cause of conflict, of course. However, it can multiply, amplify existing risks towards peace and development, especially in food security, water conflict, internal displacement, and migration. Now, the linkage of climate change and insecurity was examined by the UN Secretary Council first in April 2007. After a decade during 2017-2018, the Council came to recognize the adverse effects of climate change and ecological changes on the stability in country-specific and regional contexts. In 2017, the Council adopted Resolution 2349, highlighting the need to address climate-related risk in order to tackle the conflict in the Lake Chad Basin. This is a prime example of climate change-fueled violence and displacement. Now, Lake Chad Basin was once known as Africa's largest freshwater bodies, and therefore it was an essential source of livelihood for about 30 million people in the region. It was especially vital for the indigenous, pastoral, and farming communities in one of the world's poorest countries. However, the water body had diminished by 90% since the 1960s, fueling major environmental and humanitarian crisis. Now, the impact of a shrinking lake due to climate change, overuse of water and land, increasing population compounds the pressure on the competition on land, water, and food resources. Especially food insecurity and forced migration has caused tensions and violence allowing Boko Haram to exploit the instability and insecurity by terrorizing communities throughout the region. Now, with resource exploitation, it has spiked food prices, harming especially the vulnerable population. Therefore, the governments of Niger, Germany, and Norway, together with the UN, had co-hosted the third high-level conference on the Lake Chad region last month. As the Lake Chad Basin region continues to face with prolonged complex crisis driven by extreme poverty, climate change, violent conflict, and lack of social services. Now, to date, more than 24 million people in the region are affected by the crisis, and about 5.3 million people are displaced. Over the years, these figures have continued to grow, exploding the humanitarian needs due to floods, drought, and COVID-19. Now, also, as strongly mentioned, one of the biggest threats of climate change is driving displacement, which undermines human rights. Internal displacement is a concept that refers to each new forced movement or person within the borders of their country recorded during the year. Now, according to the Global Report on Internal Displacement, in 2021, 38 million people were newly displaced as a result of disaster, violence, and conflict. Now, if we see here, the disasters triggered more than 60% of the internal displacements that were recorded worldwide in 2021. More than 94% were the result of weather-related hazards, such as storms and floods. Most of the displacements associated with conflict and violence in 2021 were triggered by armed conflict at 12.5 million. Now, I believe we were able to answer our first question on why climate change is a problem at the international level. According to a paper that published regarding the issue on hand in the Lake Chad Basin, it has been found that rapidly diminishing resource allows extremist groups to benefit from the vulnerability of the population, which surges organized crime in the region. It manifests in drug and human trafficking, kidnapping of women, girls, and children. And therefore, water scarcity, environment degradation, soil infertility have increased the economic hardship among the region's youth, such that many turn to violence and organized crime, for they have no other opportunity or choice. All of which help sustain violent conflicts and operations of armed groups in the region, which leads to an ongoing vicious cycle that impacts all corners of life, just because of the start of diminishing resources. Now, how about the local level? That question can be answered by one word: cities. I believe that most of the participants here today will be living in cities, as I do myself. In 2016, the map here was generated using statistics that were compiled by a NASA research unit. The map shows the distribution of the world's population, and half of the humanity lives in the black space and the other half in the yellow. We can see that the people are concentrated in certain urban areas. The majority we can see are in Asia, and that's where the majority of the global population lies as well. The yellow region in the map reflects population of 8,000 or more people. The black reflects those fewer than 8,000 people. We can see here that there's an extreme population density of certain areas. Now, according to ADB, the world's urban population has grown significantly from 30% of total population in 1950 to 55% of the total population in 2018, and is estimated to increase to 60% of total population in 2030, and by 2050, 68% of the total population will be residing in urban areas. Now, the number of megacities in the world, which was in 2017, there were 29 cities with more than 10 million people. Yet by 2030, it is projected that 43 megacities will be in the world. And by 2035, 14 of the world's megacities will have populations of more than 20 million people. Now, cities account for 60 to 80% of the world's annual energy needs. And also, more than 70% of greenhouse gas emissions are emitted from cities. Now, when we talk about climate change, urbanization in a city is an inevitable word that we can't displace, because we need to approach cities in a much more sustainable way in order to mitigate and adapt to climate change impacts. Now, as the global trend accelerates toward urbanization, this means that there's a new round of construction, pollution, greenhouse gas emissions. Meanwhile, cities tend to accelerate inequality. Here, I want to quote Plato's, the ancient Greek philosopher's famous words: "Any city, however small, is in fact divided into two. One the city of the poor, the other the rich. These are at war with one another." As cities become the norm of today, we will be inching closer to potential catastrophic social and climate crisis. Now, following the heat island effect, due to concentrated office buildings and dense residential areas, we cannot dismiss the inequitable consequences, also known as thermal inequality, due to heat island effect. Now, this effect increases demand on energy, which leads to power outage in less wealthy parts. It's losses in labor productivity among workers in dense and less wealthy urban areas. It increases the rates of hospitalization. Furthermore, there was research that showed that urban crime increased due to heat island effect, concluding that the effect of heat on crime is concentrated in the poorest neighborhoods with very little effect on neighborhoods with less severe poverty. Now, this indicates that the cost of extreme weather-induced crime is unequally distributed toward the poor. Now, in today's hot summer climate, intercity metropolitan temperatures can differ significantly even between neighborhoods. Such as in 2018, this was from the Washington Post, Washington, D.C. recorded that 17-degree Fahrenheit difference was seen between inner city temperature and the surrounding urban areas. Now, as cities grow, cities are also under threat. Due to rising sea levels, 90% of urban areas in the world lie along a coast. By 2025, as much as 75% of the world's population will live on or near a coast. And Asia, which has the fastest growing middle class in the world, is home to 60% of the global population, and therefore will be vulnerable to seawater flooding in megacities. And so, water accessibility and quality around the world is a subject of considerable concern and conflict that is happening in our backyard as well. Cities in particular tend to face recurrent water shortages, and therefore changing the geographical distribution of population growth, urbanization, growth of middle class, and climate change, this will fundamentally reshape the economics and politics of water, which is also happening as we speak. Now, according to UN, the most natural disasters, perhaps as many as 90%, are related to water. And major refugee crises have erupted as a result of droughts or conflicts over water. As OECD estimated that by 2030, almost 4 billion people, half of the world's projected population, will live in areas with serious water shortages. And this is mostly in East Asia, South Asia, and Middle East. Now, in the past two decades, earthquakes and tsunamis were the deadliest form of disasters that accounted for 58% of total deaths. And as we speak, my heart goes out to Turkey and Syria, which is currently recognized as the deadliest in 10 years right now. And although I have bombarded you guys with so many depressing numbers right now, I would like to highlight, however, as global warming poses new threats, we can also make threats as opportunities, and there have been real-life examples that speak the truth. Now, the biggest threat of the future of water comes from poor farming practices, as agriculture accounts for roughly 70% of worldwide human-related water consumption. Therefore, cities are on the rise of expanding urban agriculture by producing the food we need in our backyard. Now, such development would reduce carbon emissions by reducing food imports and transportation, and an increase in urban vegetation, which would help absorb some of the emission from cars, and energy production facilities that reduces urban temperature, and also rooftop gardens help absorb excess water, rainwater. Now, the concept of vertical farming is taking hold in most developed countries. The vertical farming is where they grow food inside a building that is 2 stories high or taller, and therefore food is grown in unlikely places such as old factories, abandoned warehouses, and industrial buildings. And therefore, entrepreneurs are taking advantage of inexpensive former warehouses and factories, transforming them for agriculture use to produce local foods. One of the well-known case study is in Singapore, Sky Greens. This was one of the world's first large and commercially viable vertical farms in Singapore. And also in Michigan, the artisan farms that they use in vacant warehouses. And through this, they were able to use 20 times less water to grow a head of lettuce than its competitors in California. Now, some studies indicate that already 800 million people are engaged in urban agriculture worldwide, producing 15 to 20% of the world's food. Most of these are also happening in developing worlds, especially in Africa, as many as 35 to 40 million people are receiving their food mostly from urban farms. Therefore, today, farmers are coming up with unusual ideas to meet food demands and to adapt and mitigate climate change impacts. Now, as my presentation slowly comes to an end, I want to conclude this note in a positive note, as most of all climate change related speeches do. I've stepped forward in many ways in advocating and making a change for climate change. And if you guys look around you, there are so many grassroots organizations, NGOs, and there's also SDSN as well as we speak, and many youth leaders that are coming forward already walking the talk. And I just want to say, just don't be too discouraged with the dreadful news that we hear daily with frequent natural disasters, prices soaring due to inflation and climate change, and the ongoing war. Because climate change is a very broad topic. It impacts our lives as a threat multiplier, but I believe it can also be an opportunity multiplier, as shown in the agriculture practices. Urbanization is an inevitable trend, as I mentioned with statistics, and therefore, as the saying goes, if there is a way, there is a will. No, if there is a will, there is a way. Sorry, I got that wrong. And I know it's cliche, but I've seen this before because during my internship for the UNDP Seoul Policy Center, I was able to witness the power of knowledge sharing and capacity building. And I've focused as a resilience intern. So I was mainly working on sustainable forest management. And here, South Korea shared forest management prevention, management, and monitoring techniques with our partner countries in Africa and Asia. And so security is always at risk even today as we speak. And although we can't change the future of our Earth entirely, and our actions alone can't slow down our warming temperature, we can, however, make deliberate and impactful changes in our community alone. And my last slide is Charles Dickens once said that the most important thing to be successful is to stop saying I wish and to start saying I will. And at times like these where our world is facing new threats and crises, we need to confront these problems with possible solutions, thinking laterally, and further treating possibilities as probabilities. And yeah, and I will end my speech here. Thank you guys.
Thank you very much, Yu Jong. Thank you for your enthusiastic presentation. So from now on, we can move to next steps. So our next step is the open discussion. And if you want to share some ideas or opinions or insights to us, you can you can click this link, then you can remain some posts to us. So let me share the posts. So before I share the screen, let me introduce our new 2 panelists. Yeah, so who do you want to introduce yourself first? Maybe Yerin? Okay. Yeah. Let me introduce Miss Hoyerin, the manager of Africa Insight.
Hello, everyone. Wait.
Okay.
I hope everyone can hear me.
Yes.
Wait, I have some
Issues.
audio
Okay.
issue.
Okay. So Hyoseop maybe go
Yeah,
first.
yeah, I'll take over first. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Hyoseop, Kim Hyoseop. I'm part of the Y4S program. I am currently a graduate student of international studies in Korea University, GSIS, Korea University. I'm actually sitting down next to the UNDP Policy Center, which Ms. Kwon actually mentioned that she worked here. So Y4S is a youth initiative by a UAE-based energy company, which is called Abu Dhabi Oil Corporation. So it has the youth agenda that it prepares students and young professionals to carry forward the sustainability agenda through workshops, training, and real-time experiences. So it's a kind of like youth platform to share and learn and socialize for a sustainable future. So it's more or less a little bit like SDSN, but in a different way. So pleased to meet you and thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. Happy to have you here. And Miss Hyorin, are you ready?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello again. Thank you very much for inviting me to join you in this conversation. My name is Yalin Hao, and I'm currently working as a manager at Africa Insight, a non-governmental, non-profit organization that based in Korea that dreams of a world where African nations are respected and have independence. You can simply think of me as an invited person who loves Africa and cares about climate change as well. Well, as a speaker at the 2021 Pyeongchang Peace Forum, which is already 2 years ago, anyway, at that time, I emphasizes the urgency and importance of the implementation of SDGs for the world peace, especially for the peace on Korean Peninsula, and the role of us young people for our sustainable present and future. Over the past 2 years, some things have gotten better and some things have gotten worse. In any case, I would like to thank SDSN Korea back then and now as well for organizing such meaningful sessions where we can actually discuss the SDGs with these young people. I don't think there's anything more encouraging or stimulating to each other than, you know, just like gathering and talking together, sharing each other's insight, particularly in this, you know, precarious world where all the issues, problems, challenges, and tragedies are popping up every day. So today, I think I can particularly focus on the SDG 13 climate crisis issues of African regions. And I'm very much looking forward to the conversation that we're gonna have. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Great introduction. She's also the alumni of SSS in East Korea. She was the head of SSS in East Korea a year ago. Yeah, 2 years ago. Anyway, so before we start the open discussion, I would like to summarize the 3 presentation in my own language. So in my perspective, these 3 presentation feature us that we are now in the war, but that war is invisible war against the greenhouse gases, war against the climate change. So we need to do something by collaborate and cooperate each others. That we should not aim the gun to against each others, and now we should put our arms against the climate changes and other sustainability related issues. So let's start this war. So let me share the screen. I mean, here. So if you click the link what I shared through the chatting room. You can post your insight or questions over here. Then then the panelists can read and can give some discussion about these questions. So before I start about this Padlet things, I would like to ask some their perspectives and insights about SDG 16 and 13, because especially Hyosop, because because he didn't have any chance to present his opinion. So, and as you can see, Hyosop and I am the guy, the Korean guy, and as you may know, every Korean guy should spend 2 years in military service. So it means, Korea is the divided country, right? North and South. But also, not also, just so. So we need to spend 2 years for thinking about SDG 16 in our daily lives. So I just want to give the floor to Hyosop. What was his insight about SDG 16 before this session or during this session, or etc. etc. So what is the meaning of SDG 16 to you?
Thanks, Dongyeol. Thank you for the question. Perhaps I think I am the only known SDSN, so maybe I can give you a bit like different perspective. Anyway, so when I was in the military, yes, I served almost 2 years as well as an interpreter, helping the operation between ROK and US soldiers. And I was thinking during my service and thinking about the cost we make for peace. Because I was thinking that we are one of the most peace desperate countries, and the reason why we're enjoying this relative peace is due to the cost we pay. So I think the duration of my service, in order to in serving the army, without getting paid really, is the cost that we actually should make in order to maintain our everyday lives, right? So I just concluded myself that we are enjoying our daily life at a very, very expensive cost. And then we are also looking at the Korea's military budget spending, as we are actually talking about the 2% for the earth. We are aiming for reducing the military expenditure of the world, and then that amount we reinvest for supporting SDGs and ODAs and the other needed sectors. So we are actually on the 10th ranked in the world most spending military expenditure. So we roughly like spend 50 billion in 2021. It grows up like 2 to 5 billion every year. And then it is never enough for us because we want to get something else. We want to, get the new tanks and new jets and things. This tragic tradition will continue. Has been continuing from my grandparents' generation, and perhaps go through my generation and probably to my children's generation, right? So after that, I was actually thinking about the Ukraine war and how Ukraine war dismantled our current world that we are actually living. That I'm seeing that the war actually made us to spend more on military budget, and then because of the Russian aggression. Actually wanted to talk about how Korea is doing in terms of the contributing towards peace and SDG and climate change actually, and then how much Korea commit and fund for those initiatives. Because The first thing I want to mention about is the actually Korean defense industry and recent sales actually, that Korea is benefiting from wars and conflict, I think. A second thing is the how we are contributing to denuclearization, because we are actually now more exporting nuclear plants to the world. That's what we, the Yoon's government is actually doing. So maybe later on, as our conversation goes on, maybe I can talk about these two things. Sorry for my unorganized, discussion, but let's carry on. Yes.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. So it is quite linkaged with this question. What I saw, this thing. The first question was, although financing for SDGs and climate action is more important than ever, achieving this true disarmament seems slightly unrealistic, especially for countries like Korea, which are technically in a war situation. What would be an effective way to convince countries like Korea to join the initiatives and continue to do so? Yeah, quite tough from the first. Yeah, yes, we are in war. So maybe you can think we are in war, so we cannot do this kind of things. But in otherwise, I think because we are in war, we can speak out about these things. Because DPRK and ROK, we are still in war, so we can cut off the military expenditure. Hi, good morning. Yeah, cut off. I'm sorry. Yeah, cut off our military expenditure together. So we can reduce our military expenditure by using the conversation and by using the agreement. And also, I would like to bring this question into the UN Security Council things. I mean, the thing is, as you all know, couple of days ago, the United States they shot the Chinese balloon, right? And China is the border member of Security Council, and United States also the border member of Security Council. So they make more stress in SDG 16 nowadays, right? And otherwise, as we all know, the Russia, they are the border member of Security Council, but they invaded just a member country of United Nations, which is Ukraine. And most I would like to also drag this agenda into France, because we all remember the Daesh, ISIL in Syria, and most of the weapon what Daesh they use came from France and United States, and both of them are the border member countries of the Security Council. So the point of my explanation is we are in war and we are suffering. So our voice is more how can I say, more effective in some ways. So if we feature this kind of our situation to Security Council countries and let us cut off our entire military expenditure all together at the same time, then I think it might be works in somehow way. So yeah, obviously Republic Korea cannot do this alone, right? Because we are in war. So we can bring this situation into other countries, especially who invading other countries and who make some conflict to other countries, then in that in that circumstance we can speak out more louder and louder. Yeah. And who else? Afik, maybe you can add some your opinion outside of Korean Peninsula.
So Dom, you want me to address the first question on the Padlet or on the
Yeah.
chat?
Paddle listing.
On the Padlet, okay. So the unrealistic approach of disarmament because Korea is technically at war, right? That's the question, right? Okay, I think I'm coming from a political science and international relations perspective. For me, I was thinking about how to answer this question, and the first thing that came to my mind was to strengthen international coalitions. So South Korea would join hands with stronger nations, right, and put pressure towards North Korea to disarm themselves. Okay, but it is a double-edged sword by saying that, because while South Korea would like to be reunited or would like to unite the whole Korean peninsula, it may not be the case with North Korea. They may not have the same thinking. Even though in 2018 there was a historic meeting between Kim Jong-un and the then prime minister, or the president of South Korea at the time in 2018, to have talks first. So my point is, rather than going outside and joining forces with Japan or UK or Germany, it would only put unnecessary tension on North Korea. I'd rather perhaps the South Korean government should focus not outside but within. So which means continue the conversations that was had in 2018 with North Korea. Because again, from a political science background, if you were to go outside and strengthen your allies, North Korea would only see you as a bigger threat if you go outside. So I'd say focus more within, focus on the bilateral relationship with North Korea, and don't be so hung up on, oh, we must create an alliance with Germany, with US, with Japan, with other nuclear countries. That would only put North Korea on edge, and they are already easily triggered, as you know, with all the training missiles that always are released. So I say focus on the bilateral conversations and continue from 2018's conversation with Kim Jong-un. So that is my perspective.
Okay, thank you for sharing your opinion.
Yes. However, Dom, sorry, what I said just now, I actually welcome any feedback from what I just said, or any opinion if you agree or disagree, because of course I'm not Korean and I wouldn't know the Korean experience of living in Korea with a neighboring country who has nuclear weapons. So I welcome that perspective as well. Thank you.
So actually our president is changed on last year, and
Yeah, so the former, I was referring to the former.
our new president is opposite party rather than our former president. So yeah, you can just jump in.
Oh, sorry. So I just wanted to point out that military spending is panic spending. So I think it should be based on mutual trust in minimizing the whole budget. So I think it's important to have the talk between those states, well, us and them, actually, in order to stay still with the spending. Just wanted to point out, no, it's a panic spending.
Yep. Thank you for pointing it out. Yeah. So anyway, it is quite tough, but you know, I don't think like unrealistic means impossible. I mean, unrealistic is kind of ideally or quite harsh, but it doesn't mean it is impossible. So I think we can figure it out. How can we achieving this kind of detaching this kind of obstacles, and how can we processing to spread out the good willings. And here's 2 questions. So I think we're only boys are talked. So next question might be goes to Miss Kwon Yujong. Question to Miss Kwon and Kang and others. Oh yeah, she and me. How to overcome soil still approach to climate and security? What do you think are main obstacles to the campaign for financing for climate and SDGs through discernment? How can you convince general public and follow youth who think military spending is necessary for national security against the military threat, real or potential, from neighboring countries? Can it be a political agenda for general election next year? How to make it an issue in the National Assembly? Wow, I choose quite tough issue. What do you think, Miss Kwon?
Yeah, I was just rereading the question. I think it's a very hard but needs to be discussed question. However, I do want to talk based on from my experience, and I have been involved in the financing part, but regarding military issue and national security wise, regarding putting money into like disarmament issues, I don't really have much experience on that, but I can focus this question based on financing, which actually, since I'm a university student, it narrows down all the way down to university level, but with the East Asian other youth organizations, we formed a coalition to exert pressure to our universities in divesting from coal. We realized in 2017, 2018, especially in Taiwan, they started to exert pressure on universities to phase out coal after realizing that our universities were investing in coal. And so that was a really big, huge deal back then. And so we made a coalition and we started to, synergize our voice, and we went to the international community as well, voicing this approach worldwide. And we did gain some momentum, but in Korea, there was the issue of transparency issue. We didn't really have that, we didn't really have the proper information to exert the right pressure to our university, because they were very reluctant and they were not they were reluctant to share where they were investing their money in. However, I feel like nowadays, since my school, my university, it has announced to go carbon neutral by 2045. And so I think we're in the right atmosphere right now to exert that pressure. Like, I feel like we have that, we have the environmental support. Like, even 4 years back, everyone, when we talked about climate change and all this like global financing to divestment, there were a lot of especially high level people who were very reluctant to speak with us. But nowadays, when we come forward with this issue, a lot of people are willing to hear us. And I feel like that major change in support allows us to kind of exert the pressure on this. And when we're talking international security and military level, I believe that this can also be approached in the similar stance. first of all, youth alone, we don't have that. We don't really have that. What do I say? That we like youth alone can't exert pressure. That's what I felt when I went to COP26. We need to gather in a globalized society, but that's much more efficient nowadays because of social media. It's so much easier to connect with other neighboring countries. When I was in COP26, we formed a side event with Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Japan. And 4 of us, we talked about the carbon neutrality issue, what we were doing back in our home country. And onwards, we tried to sustain this conversation and this dialogue back home in order to have that support. And so I feel like nowadays, when we're talking about how we're going to exert the right pressure, first, we need that international support in a youth level. Like we need to make sure that youth are on the same level when we're talking about this. And second of all, it's really sustainability and being consistent with what you're saying, because this won't happen overnight, of course. It will happen over a year or 2. But right now, I think that we're in the right momentum because we have the environmental support. We have ongoing issues that really talk about the problem on hand, how this national security issue is an issue not only due to military, but as I've mentioned, resource conflicts, how this will lead on to ongoing violence and conflicts that would distort our peace and development. And so everything is linked together. And I feel like making sure that you're consistent and sustaining what you're trying to say is very, very important. So I think I started to blab on and on, but I just want to say what's most important is to make sure you're consistent and you're consistent and you continue on voicing that with the proper pressure. And also you need that international coalition support in the especially for youth, because just alone our voice won't be delivered as much as we want it to. So I hope that kind of answered your question, but yeah, that was just my point of view.
Yeah, great answer. So I think we are a bit overheated about Korean Peninsula issues. So I would like to keep the focus away from Korean Peninsula. So we have a panel from Africa Insight. So maybe we can move our focus onto the African continent. So Yerin, if you have some idea, or
Yes, thank you.
can you share the situation in Africa about SDG 16 or 13?
Well, yeah, through the previous presentations and some discussions, which were all very clear and insightful and well-founded, we've got to know that all around worldwide action, especially like financial mobilization through disarmament, is necessary. Well, disarmament is certainly a complicated and tough issue, and I'm sorry that I feel like I'm cutting off the topic, but you can think of my part as a small break time, I guess. It's not directly about disarmament, but still indirectly is.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I prepared a presentation.
Oh, you prepared.
Well,
yeah, the flow is yours.
According to the World Economic Forum's 2023 Global Risk Report, climate crisis-related environmental risk feature in the top 4 risk over the next 10 years, as you can see. So it is so much clear and irrefutable that the climate crisis is one of the most serious and urgent challenges that we're facing. Extreme weather and climate disaster keep occurring and occurring more frequently and intensely and indiscriminately around the world. As you can see, in 2022, the world was burned by heat waves and droughts and flooded by heavy rains, and the war situation makes it worse, putting various food and energy in crisis. So we people from all around the world now can feel the impact of this climate crisis in our flesh. It's becoming our existential social crisis, a matter of survival. So from now on, I would like to talk a bit about the climate crisis, especially in the African region, not because Africa is the poorest or the most pitiful or has no power to stand on its own. It's just because Africa is the most unknown, distant, and unfamiliar world to us. I hope you will take this opportunity to lightly learn about what's going on the other side of the globe. In Antonio Guterres' world, Africa barely contributes to global greenhouse gas emission, yet it's paying an outsized price. Yes, Africa is warming faster than the rest of the world. Increases in hot extreme, including heat waves and marine waves, increases in frequency and intensity of heavy rainfall, and rise in sea levels are observed all around Africa. But you have to know that Africa is a large continent of 55 countries, and warming and extreme weathers are not distributed equally across the continent, as you can see. So I'm going to break it down into 7 parts and briefly introduce the climate crisis issues that each part are facing respectively, but I'm not going to cover all the parts due to the time constraint. Well, first we can look at the Mediterranean region, North Africa. Notably, the warming trend for North Africa is higher than all over the other African subregions. The temperature across North Africa was 1.2 degrees Celsius above compared to the pre-industrial levels. The amount of rainfall is decreasing while dryness, drought, and fire weather conditions are increasing. As you can see, Tunisia experienced the hottest summer in 2021 since 1950, and Algeria was affected by multiple major wildfires. So more than like 40,000 hectares was burned. And next is West Africa. The West African monsoon is getting shorter, with delayed onset and early succession, but getting stronger because of the above average sea surface temperature over the tropical Atlantic Ocean. So most of the rain fell over a short period, and this heavy precipitation eventually lead to localized flooding. So this erratic rain negatively affects the cereal production and food prices. So like Nigeria experienced the worst flooding in 2022, contributing the spread of cholera. More than 600 people died and more than 1 million have been displaced. In Niger, extremely heavy rainfall and floods affected more than 230,000 people. And the lack of infrastructure and the government's ability to manage these natural disasters are making the situation worse. On the other hand, the Horn of Africa is now experiencing its worst drought in more than 40 years. Ethiopia, Somalia, and Kenya faced an exceptional long multi-seasonal drought due to 3 consecutive below average rainy seasons. And this left more than 58 million East African people in acute food insecurity. And the La Nina condition and negative Indian Ocean dipole values contribute to this drier condition in East Africa. And warmer sea surface temperature over the southwestern Indian Ocean and the La Nina events caused the occurrence of tropical cyclone across the southern part of Africa last year. And the tropical cyclone Eloise hit the Mozambique and over 7,000 people were affected. Lastly, Madagascar. In 2021, Madagascar faced its worst drought since 1981, which has persisted for at least 2 years, leaving the population on the brink of famine. As the agriculture is completely devastated, people are searching for insect and cactus to survive, according to WPF. And more than 1 million of people are experiencing high level of acute food insecurity. Well, so how was the short trip to the other side of the world? It doesn't really feel like far away from us, right? The story is just like what we are all going through, although the lower adaptive capacity, high level of poverty, and financial technological constraint make Africa particularly more vulnerable. Well, I feel like I also live with the anxiety that I could always be a victim of the climate crisis. As Yoo-jung mentioned before, among Seoul, the center of South Korea, the most center area Gangnam was flooded by heavy rains last summer, causing several small and huge damages. At that time, I actually received a disaster alert notification telling me to evacuate in case of landslide near my place. Like on the other hand, as the drought in the southern part of Korea has prolonged, and the issue of limited water supply has arose considerable alarm. So as you can see, I can always be, and we can always be a victim of this crisis. But what I want to say is that what is the point of living if we get too much, lethargic in the face of such a situation? We actually have to do something, and as the previous speakers addressed, full-fledged discussion and actions for 2% for the earth are needed right now. And I can say there is no time to be lost. Yeah, no doubt about it.
Great. So further question, I saw this question on the question book. So we travel from Korean Peninsula to Africa. So now is the time to ASEAN. So I saw this question. Question to Mr. Afik and others. ASEAN is already nuclear weapon free zone, and ASEAN is a buffer between China and USA, and share the concept to common security. How youth and CSO, civil society organizations in ASEAN can play more proactive role for disarmament campaign in Asia and beyond ASEAN.
Okay, thank you, Dong. So the questions on the role of youth and CSOs, right, in ASEAN. ASEAN is a very unique region. If you ever been here, very high population, very high youth population. So which means where there is high youth population, there is also high youth digital literacy. So you see where I'm getting at. Using digital literacy as a form of a tool to raise awareness on disarmament and denuclearization. I totally understand how we are the subject of tug and tussle between US and China. What do you call this? The US will label this region as Indo-Pacific, where everybody else will say Southeast Asia. So we have two labels here, and it's clearly a political delineation between two separate powers. But the point I want to make first is about the role of youth and social media. So we have LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and the people behind it are very capable youth. They can exponent their voice through social media, and therefore they can raise awareness about such issues on nuclear disarmament, denuclearization. And once it's out on the social media or cyberspace, it will circulate, and everybody who is outside ASEAN will see it. So they know that there is a movement in ASEAN on disarmament and denuclearization because of the youth who know how to use social media. And we all know this, social media such as Instagram is a very powerful tool that we can use to our own advantage. Secondly, and this is where SDSN is a bit related, we can be a pressure group or advocacy group. Sorry, the youth and the CSOs can band together to become a pressure group or a advocacy group. So, you know, and with lobby groups, you can push for disarmament policies. You can become a convener to have multi-stakeholder dialogue between relevant parties at the national and also regional level. And in this dialogue, you can have government officials, you can submit policy briefs, you can even participate in disarmament conferences and meetings. It could be a UN side event, as Ms. Yujung mentioned, and any opportunity that allows the youth or the CSOs to get close to government officials is a good opportunity in that sense. So that is another way the youth and the CSO can push for disarmament policies. Also, I can mention one more. Also related to SDSN, we are very research driven, research focused. So the youth and CSOs can engage either voluntarily or paid research on research and analysis on disarmament. So it involves collecting and disseminating information on disarmament issues, and then you feed that research data back to the government officials or the relevant government officials, or even the ASEAN Secretariat, which is based in Jakarta. So again, coming from SDSN background, I would propose advocacy group, research and analysis. As a youth myself, although almost not going to be a youth anymore, but regardless, the power of social media is undeniable. And it can, and if you're familiar with Twitter and Instagram, it can really get people's attention halfway around the world. And this is the best time because politicians themselves are also on these social media platforms. Their offices have a dedicated comms person to handle this engagement with the people through social media. So that is the simplest one, social media engagement, followed by research and also advocacy groups. That would take a bit more work, but that is where people like myself and Dong can come in and assist. Back to you, Dong.
Yeah, great. So, yeah, great point. And I would like to add some few quite little opinion on Afik's opinion. So I think youth and civil society organizations can be the watchdog for monitoring their government, but also we can manipulate our government into sustainable way. For example, United Nations, they created UN SDGs, but most of countries, so they established their own national SDGs, such as in case of Korea, we made KSDGs, or Cambodia, they create CSDGs. So, and especially in CSDGs, they have SDG 18, which is detaching the mine field, because historically they have some civil wars, and during the civil war they make a lot of minefields, but nowadays still the civilians sometimes set the mine and boom up, and they sometimes they become disabled people like that. So if your country have your national SDGs, then you can be the monitor of national SDGs. And if your country do not have national SDGs, you can make some peer pressure to your government to create national SDGs. And then if your country have national SDGs, you can go to your local authorities and create local SDGs and become a monitor of local SDGs. And at the same time, you can be the implementer of local SDGs and etc. etc. And also, I would like to introduce two more opportunities, which is Civil 7 and Civil 20. It means, the group of nations, G7, G20, right? So, but G7 and G20 is the most strongest countries alliance, right? So they are quite rich. So sometimes they ignore about the environmental effect. So maybe you can join in the Civil 7 and Civil 20 to deliver your opinions and your insights to the governmental stakeholders by cooperating and collaborating and discussing with other countries, civil society organizations, and youth activists. Then we can achieve the SDGs on 2030, or hopefully earlier than 2030. Yeah. Yep, I think we are almost done, but we still have 5 minutes, and maybe Joseph have some
Oh, yes.
idea,
So I think I really
opinions.
agree with your point that we should be, as a youth, to act as a watchdog, a pressure group to move our government and national leaders. And in this case, our country, Korea, like to actually suggest that we continue to monitor about Korea's, whether Korea is not contradicting to SDG efforts. I'd like to actually point out the fact that Korea is actually now benefiting from wars and conflicts, that Korea is actually selling out a lot of arms. As we all know, between Korea and Poland has $15 billion deal. Egypt, Australia, Norway, and then Saudi Arabia, UAE. Also, Korean government is delivering more of the technology of nuclear industry. I know this is civilian power plant strategy, but this one can easily convert to nuclear weapons. I'd like to actually point out two things that Korea is not really doing well in this regard, that which do completely contradicting actions now. We are actually, as a youth, need to monitor and watchdog as a watchdog and ask them for information why you're doing this like that. I don't personally think that this is a very proud South Korean trading power. I don't think this multi-billion dollars arms deal sounds like a exciting exercise of trade power in Korea. I suggest that as we sell more arms, if it's inevitable stuff, we need to pay more for the contribution to SDGs and development, ODA. As Mr. Kang pointed out in his presentation, the first part, we are actually remaining 0.16 as of 2021, ODA GNI. We need to expand more. The OECD DAC average is 0.33. We are way below the level. And then we all know the target is 0.7. We got long way to go. Then we are selling out our arms. We are actually getting a lot of benefit from arms, and we are now exporting nuclear technologies more that can easily convert to nuclear weapons. I'm not really a big fan of this strategies. So I suggest SD, SN, and other groups to keep monitor or keep research about these issues. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your insightful summarization. He penetrated the entire agenda in quite a short time. Thank you again. And Yujong or Yerin or Afik, Would you like to add some? If not, yeah, let's conclude here. And thank you for your participation and join us. And if you want to go further with SDSN, please contact to Afik or me. You can just Google SDSN, Sustainable Development Solutions Network. Then you can easily reaching out me or Afik or other your regional network for the focal points. And I strongly believe we can change the world in better future. So can we take a group photo at the last time? Yeah, like this pose. This is the SDG wheel pose. It seems like SDG wheel, so please take this pose all together.
How do you make a wheel? Wheel like this?
Yeah, wheel.
Wheel.
SDG wheel. Yeah.
Okay.
I will take the picture. Yeah. 1, 2, 3.
May I suggest to take one more photo with the three
Yeah.
fingers? Remember 3 fingers to show our solidarity for
Yes.
people, including youth in Myanmar, Ukraine, and Russia, all over the world. Okay, 3 fingers. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Have a good bye. good morning or good evening and see you in another round for achieving SDGs. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay.